right. Uh, Good evening, everyone. It is so lovely to be here talking to you all today about Rate the Landlord. We were so excited to get this invitation. I think one, just for the chance to talk about it with people in Toronto, and also because it means that we are being recognized as tech for good, which is what our aim is. But of course, we will talk about kind of the disruptive nature of this project and how it was received, but we are grateful to be among like-minded people tonight. So in terms of how Rate the Landlord got started, it got started like most new things do, just with lots of conversations about why doesn't this exist. There are kind of versions of this that have tried to work in the past in different forms, but through various conversations between myself and some friends, we really started to kind of want something like this. And this was just out of pure experience. I myself am a resident in Toronto. I moved to Toronto when I was in my undergraduate, and I've been in Toronto for a number of years now afterwards. And I remember my first experience living in Toronto and thinking, man, this is brutal. But I must have made a mistake. I must have not, I must have done something wrong as to why my housing experience is so unbelievably brutal. But experience after experience, friend after friend, community after community, I learned this was the norm, both in the city and just around. Sorry, there's a little bit of feedback. Okay, it's gone. So yeah, just lots of conversations, wondering if there was a way that tenants could know what they were getting into, because everyone's experience could essentially be summed up as being completely blindsided, being told one thing and then experiencing another, et cetera, et cetera. So one evening, my friend and I were talking about this, and we decided to just basically put out something that was so simple. It was a Google form that was attached to a spreadsheet, and people would just type in information about their landlords with regards to their repair attention, health and safety, things like that. And we just threw it out onto the internet. Specifically, I went to Reddit, and I just went to a bunch of communities and asked, is there any devs out there that would be willing to make this happen? I was clear that it was totally volunteer, but I was hoping that the idea would be worthwhile and people would want to jump on board. And that's how I met Kellen. So I'll pass it over to him.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kellen Wiltshire. I'm a web developer from the Kingston area. So I met RJ through Reddit, and I was really interested in helping out with helping build the site. At the time, I was quite new to web development in general, and was just happy to be working on something that I could maybe learn from and grow. It started off with a small team of us, but as time went on, it quickly became just me. So we decided that we wanted to get something out there where it's very minimal, just people can submit reviews and people can read reviews, and we figured we'd get a few hundred visitors over the first couple of weeks, and we could slowly build on it from there. We decided in the beginning that we didn't want to make people have to leave an email or make an account or any sort of way that would leave them identifiable for their own safety. We knew this would eventually cause problems down the line, and we'll touch on that later. But once the MVP was ready, we decided to see how it would go and put it out to the world.
So when we decided to launch Rate the Landlord, like Kellen mentioned, we were really expecting minimal engagement, somewhere, in a couple hundred visitors a day. And our plan was to kind of slowly build. But that is basically the opposite of what happened within the first week of just launching and throwing it up on certain Reddit communities and on social media. We were getting thousands and thousands of visitors a day, not to mention a influx of media attention, which at the time we were really passionate about getting this message out there about tenant, just the circumstances tenants have to face and the right for this to exist. And so we took those media interviews, looking back, we could have really slowed that down and been a bit more wise about that, because ultimately we were just inundated with attention. Lots of it very, very positive and supportive, but a lot of it very, very negative and malicious, which inspired some of the initial attacks that we weren't exactly prepared for. We had people injecting stuff into the site so that it would redirect to some unsavory places. And one particular individual attempted to delete all the information off the site. Luckily, we had it, Kellen had saved it, but this required us to really take a step back and realize that we were dealing with not just negative opinions, but actually negative action. I actually got a message, anonymous message from this particular individual on Reddit that was quite threatening. But it really spoke to the fact that we could not have anticipated this sort of thing at all. And so we kind of flew really close to the sun at the beginning, and then we got a little bit burned. So I'll pass it to Kellen to talk about how we slowed down and managed that.
So we ended up making the call to take the site down for, I think it was about a weekend, so we could work on it and come up with a better plan of attack to make sure that the site was safe for the users go to, and safe from any vulnerabilities that have been exploited. At this time too, we also had a couple thousand reviews on the site, and it wasn't really built for that type of volume. So it was a good chance to also clean up the site and make it a little bit more scalable for as things go on. We were down for about 3 days, and when we came back, everything came back. The visitors came back just as if we never left. We started getting more media requests again, and we actually had our peak day after that at about 80,000 unique visitors in a 24-hour period. We knew there was going to be more issues as they come up down the road, such as things with spam, but it felt like the more known vulnerabilities we had blocked off. For as many people that were trying to attack the site, though, it was great to have a lot of people also messaging us that they wanted to help and review code and give their own knowledge into helping make sure that the site was safer for everyone when we reopened. So it was great to have that help as well, and we're ready for the relaunch.
Yeah, so when we relaunched the site, we made a couple of changes. We, of course, made the site more secure. There was some misuses that we wouldn't have anticipated. People would, of course, ban the site, but there was a period of time in which a lot of landlord groups banded together to try and kind of co-opt the site and rate tenants on the site by just using the tech space to talk about that. So we had to be on watch at all times. It was a really exhausting period. I would spend pretty much all day having the site open so I could monitor it for misuse. But this allowed us to really meet and introduce a moderation policy where we actually talked about what we would and wouldn't allow on the site, which Kellen will speak on in a moment. Another thing that we did in our relaunch was change some of the tone on the website to hopefully just dampen some of the negative perceptions. When we started, it was very much sort of justice focused, holding landlords accountable. And while that is true in our vision, we decided to focus more on a community information sharing sort of framework, as this would resonate both with the people that we were trying to help and hopefully give just the broader public understanding of why this kind of thing should exist and should be accessible to people who are seeking housing. So that was one of the big changes that we made. We also introduced a guide for tenants for reading reviews, just encouraging them to look for certain things to focus on meaningful information and legitimacy. But I'll pass it to Kellen to discuss sort of the ways that we've tried to handle moderation from these particular incidents.
So with the amount of reviews that we were getting, we decided that we needed to actually sit down and come up with a more ironclad moderation policy. We looked at a lot of the examples from Google reviews, Yelp, Rate My Professor, Rate My Doctor, things like that, and tried to come up with a solution that fit our circumstances. That being said, there were still just the two of us, and we are getting a lot of reviews per day that it was kind of hard to keep up with. And especially there are some reviews that are being flagged, as false positives or just people who were upset with the reviews that they received, so they wanted to flag it. So we decided to integrate ChatGPT into the review moderation. At first, we were having it actually clean the reviews for us if they contain any swear words, slurs, phone numbers, addresses, or anything like that. But it started to inject its own opinions into the reviews as well, which is not going to work. So we decided to step back and just have it so it would return a sort of yes or no if it felt that the reviews violated our policy, and we would manually review it. This made things a lot easier in that sense. We are also experiencing some issues with spam, both people spamming bad reviews for the landlord every day, as well as landlords spamming good reviews for themselves every day. So we had to put in some protections there, such as throttling the amount of reviews that can come from an IP address in a certain time period, and utilizing local storage on their browser to make sure that they're not reviewing, or the same browser isn't reviewing the same landlord multiple times. Once we kind of had these things all patched up, though, we went back to try to sort of build out more of a development team to help on the development side. We were lucky to actually come across a few good developers that have started to contribute to the site quite a bit, which has allowed me to focus on more infrastructure and bigger picture goals for the site. As much as it was tough to give up some of that control because I coded it all myself from the beginning. It's been nice to be able to focus on the bigger things and help teach some junior devs or new devs that are also just finishing school to get some experience, and they've been great and a very valuable resource and volunteering their time and helping to make it even better. So if you are a dev that wants to help out, just send us an email, and I'd love to chat with you about seeing if you can assist us.
So that basically brings us to where we are now with the site. We, are still learning a lot. There's things we would have never anticipated, like we mentioned, that we've had to deal with. Obviously, we've had our fair share of encounters with landlords, and but like Kellen said, the support and the positivity from tenant groups and tenants globally has been just so encouraging, and really has inspired us to build the site into something beyond just a review site for landlords, and actually make it a resource for tenants, because a lot of people are coming to this site after having a really, really brutal experience and not knowing kind of what the future holds, not knowing their rights, not knowing that they have community. And it's really important to us that we connect them to a community. I'm sort of embarrassed to admit this, but before I started the site, I actually didn't even know tenant unions existed, which is really sad because they're really incredible resources and groups that are available in all different cities all over the world. And people don't even know that they can access these resources. So our goal for the future is to connect with these groups and ask them what they need. We don't pretend to know everything that needs to be done here. And so it's important for us to kind of open our ears and listen for what's needed, because I think some of the best ideas for the site are yet to come. So we basically want to create a hub that's dynamic, searchable, where tenants can go and connect and find ways to get the help that they need. This will be a long-term goal, long-term build. Right now, we just have a couple, tenant union names and resources pasted on there, but we're really hoping to build this in the future. And so that's something we can talk about more in the discussion or Q&A if anyone has ideas or feedback. But essentially, this brings us up to speed with where we are today. We breezed through all of that very quickly. So, of course, we welcome any questions. Nothing's off the table. And we just really thank you all for having us here to just share this with you and hopefully just get some awesome feedback from y'all. So thank you so much. That brings me to the end. So I'll pass it back over to Han.
Hey, thank you, RJ, and Kellen there. So yeah, we will move on to the QA portion. Yeah, should we just sort of have this open, like? Yeah, if anybody online has a question, drop it in the chat, and yes, we'll sort of go back and forth maybe. Online versus in person. So maybe we'll start in person.
Hi. So I just want to say, first of all, that this is a very bold use of technology. And I think it's incredible because I've had terrible landlords in the past. And if there was ever an example of how to just build a website that helps people, this is like unbelievable to see. And what you guys have persevered through, like, yeah, it's just very inspiring. So I just want to say that. I'm curious what the first MVP looked like.
Sorry, so do you mean the first one as in like the literal spreadsheet or the first actual website?
Like the first online presence that people could post reviews to.
Oh God, I don't even know if I still have it. I'll pass it to Kellen to maybe talk about what the first MVP looked like for the site, and I'll just quickly dig around and see if I have it, and then I can maybe share it with everyone.
So the first MVP that we really launched with was a very similar rating form that we had now. And then it was just a review page that would basically format the reviews very similar to how they are now, just in one long page. I didn't really put much thought into pagination or anything like that at the time because, again, we only thought we'd have, you know, in the first month or so, we'd only have a couple hundred reviews and it was something we could slowly build on. But it eventually became very quickly a very large, long page full of reviews that was, you know, you couldn't even scroll to the bottom of it. It was so big. But it's really not too much different in looks to what we have now, but there is a lot more functionality in place, such as filtering and searching and things like that.
Yeah, sorry, I cannot find that original version. That was just picture literally a Google form and a Google spreadsheet with rules loosely pasted on the top. That was basically it. But truly, people still posted on it, which was what was crazy and what kind of made me think that this could be a thing. And luckily, yeah, Kellen, made it happen. And that's crazy. I also just want to say thank you for understanding that it was hard because it was. And sometimes it's like we feel crazy and it's nice to hear it and be like, oh yeah, that was actually really, really crazy. Those initial days were insane. So it's good to hear from you on that front.
Quick follow-up question. Have you thought of having property owners advertise for themselves on the platform, but in a way that you guys have allowed, like according to a mandate or something like that?
We have had offers from landlords. I think we've received some emails from landlords wanting, or property management companies wanting to do that exact thing. I don't think it's something that we're currently exploring, but ideally at some point down the line, as the site gets more and more visibility, it could be one of those things where they are able to, say, oh, we have a 5-star rating on Rate The Landlord, like, so, we're a good landlord or things like that, in that sort of way. But I think it would probably cross some sort of conflict if we were taking advertisements or taking money or any sort of quid pro quo from landlords while also be those taking reviews on those landlords. And I don't know how we would be able to balance that in a fair and transparent way.
Yeah, one of the things that has been really central to our discussions when making considerations about the site is like tenants first sort of thing, and wanting to create that sort of trusting community. And when we started, like, there was still a lot of skepticism, even from different tenant communities, kind of being like, oh, are these guys gonna become Yelp basically and let landlords pay them off to delete certain things or whatever. And it's really important, not just for like our image, but for building community and trust, to just focus on tenant needs at this time, and not, even though of course landlords should strive for good ratings, and hopefully when people do get good ratings, they can choose to leverage that in any way that they want, but not kind of making that the ultimate goal of the site. Again, when it comes to tone, our main focus has really been sharing information, and not focusing on whether that information is good or bad, but just getting all the information you need to make an informed choice.
Okay, so then should we take some questions from online now?
Yep. So we have Peter first. Peter, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thanks a lot for doing the presentation. Sorry, my video doesn't work. So my question is, do you have any mechanism in place to make sure that the person is rating the actual landlord as opposed to a random person? So for instance, if I didn't like a particular landlord, me and all my friends could give their landlord a negative rating. So I'm wondering if, or I could pay, say, a content form, which would basically have like 1,000 people negatively rate the landlord.
Yeah,
Thanks
that's
so much.
yeah, thanks for your question. That's a great question. I'll just briefly give my thoughts and pass it to Kellen for more maybe the technical side. We get questions like this quite frequently when we started, and our kind of instinct is to point to other sort of review sites and say, like, we're not doing something new here. We didn't reinvent the wheel. These concerns are applicable across the board when it comes to information online. So we don't have something in place to confirm that you are speaking of your exact landlord, in the same way that other review sites cannot confirm that you went to said restaurant or went to said doctor or had a class with said professor, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, this concern is important to us, especially as it relates to people, what you're concerned about content farms and spamming, which I think I'll pass to Kellen to address how we would kind of go about informing tenants about that and keeping an eye on that particular thing.
Yeah, in terms of that sort of spamming, we do have a little bit of infrastructure in place to try to quell that a little bit. That said, if you wanted to pay a content farm to leave 1,000 reviews, we would notice that quite quickly, just in terms that, if we got a 10% uptick in the amount of reviews we get in a very short period of time, all for a single landlord, that's a pretty clear flag that there's something nefarious going on. In the same way that, if we search a landlord's name or we get reports that, if there's 10 reviews for one landlord within a 2-day period, that's pretty clear that there's something going on there. Really, a landlord should probably only be getting a new review on our site every year or so, and likely, only in batches of 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how many tenants were in there. We're living with that landlord. So anything that's blowing that out of proportion would be pretty quickly caught, and hopefully we'd be able to mitigate it as best we can.
Awesome. We do have another question from Heron. I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Do you want to maybe try type into the chat, and we'll come back to your question? Awesome.
I guess while we're doing, while Heron is typing his question into the chat, did anybody else have a question on this person?
Thanks for the presentation. I'm really curious to hear about your experience of using, it sounds like Reddit played a big role in the sort of formation and creation and promotion of the site. I'm curious about your experience of like using Reddit for that purpose versus promoting it through other channels. Yeah,
this is a great question, and something that I think fits into the category of high highs and low lows. I'm not from a tech background. I'm a graduate student in Toronto. And so I didn't really even know where to go or you know what places existed in order to get help. So my first thought was like, oh, Reddit has groups of people, and some of those groups have like-minded ideas. For example, there's a Reddit called r/socialist programmers, right? So that's telling me right off the bat, okay, here's what I'm gonna find here. Maybe people will be interested. So my thought really initially when I was just trying to get that MVP out there was less about Reddit and more about just needing a place to find specific sorts of people. And that was the most positive experience I actually had. So many people were excited and wanted to get involved and just so generous with their time. And obviously Kellen being one of those people that kind of flourished into him becoming a co-founder. But once the site was actually ready, we really had to re-examine our relationship with Reddit because promotion on there is kind of what led, I think, to a lot of the initial attacks. The media stuff was being posted. There's obviously a lot of very aggressive groups, but even non-aggressive groups, like I remember, so the initial attacks that happened with the injections happened because of a huge explosion on r/Canada housing. And people were essentially openly plotting in the comments to take down the site and sharing information with each other on how to do that. And I actually reached out to the mods and said like, hey, this is becoming really out of control. We are getting harassed both in messages and via attacks. And I got a response that just said, take it up with Vice, which was the first article the first media interview we did. We had later done some with like CBC and CTV Toronto, etc. But their response, take it up with Vice, really like made me upset and kind of like worried, because I kind of assumed like there was some kind of like authority or moderation behind this kind of behavior. And I was just met with like, you did this, you should kind of suffer the consequences as the response. So from there, I kind of watched just the downfall of the reception of the site on Reddit. Everywhere else that it was getting reception, all social media, everything else was just so incredibly supportive and positive. And we had tenant unions reaching out to us and following us and all of these incredible connections. And all I was seeing on Reddit was things just getting worse and worse. Groups coming together for the sole purpose of destroying the site, landlords banding together to find ways to try and hurt us, both as the co-founders, the site itself, and plotting how they would punish tenants. So we've since completely stopped all promotion on Reddit. I have not gone on Reddit for the purpose of the site in a long time. I'm sorry, this was a long answer, but that kind of just gives a really good and detailed description of what it was like and what we learned, I think, more importantly from that.
Thank you, okay, for the answer. So I think everyone posted their answer in the chat. And the question was about if you had any community building features sort of coming in the future, sort of related to the site.
We're looking. The biggest thing is we want to become more of a hub for tenants, especially when it comes to tenant resources. So having a way for tenants to link up with tenant unions or tenant legal assistance, things like that in their city or state or province is something that we really want to focus on. And we'd also like to be able to provide additional resources that maybe those tenant resources would like to post on our sites, maybe in the form of blog posts or articles or things like that, that might have more of a frequently asked questions like, is this illegal? Is this not illegal? That maybe we can help shed some light on. So it's a little bit more again, that hub for tenants to come to. Something like a forum or some sort of messaging system within the site is not something that we're really looking at right now. Once you start getting into allowing people to create accounts, it becomes a little bit more difficult security wise, and especially privacy wise, between the different countries that we're currently taking reviews from. That said, if we find a way or find a solution that makes sense for the site in terms of it being that hub, then we're not going to rule anything out down the line.
Great. Yeah. So did we have any other questions in person or yeah?
Thank you so much for the presentation. And parts of it honestly sounds like they were quite scary. Honestly, I'm just thinking, like, as a woman interested in technology, like, oh yeah, this is why we don't build things. But anyway, that's aside. I was kind of curious in looking at the site. So there are a couple of things, and I think some of the feedback that came from the, I guess, landlord community, from lack of a better term. And looking at the site, like, I think it's so interesting, the piece around actually listing landlords' names, like when that comes up on associated properties. And I suppose I was curious if you ever explored also as a kind of maybe a different way of doing feedback or providing an additional layer of feedback. I was curious if you would or have explored letting renters kind of attach themselves to properties so that a prospective renter, like with the openness to provide information or provide information maybe without typing it out or like having it actually be on the site. I was just kind of interested in the additional kind of ways that you explored how they might in future kind of provide that sort of community of support as renters, both without maybe probably for themselves going through the potential of even like having a review associated with a timestamp or something like that. I'm just gonna think of safety in all directions.
Sorry, just for clarification, do you mean like so creating some kind of mechanism where a prospective tenant could reach out to a former tenant?
Yeah. It's kind of like instead of the landlord providing references, they don't do, it would be like a way of tenants offering to be references for a landlord in future, but like they would make that situation themselves, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really cool piece of feedback. I'll probably pass it to Kellen to talk about potential issues, because honestly that would be fantastic. I would say the two things come to my mind is one, we would have to store data, personal data, which we don't currently. We would have to have some way of them being able to request contact information from this person, which means that we would have to have the email or something of that person in order to inform them someone wants to get in touch. So we would have to brainstorm about how we would go about that. And then I think the other potential concern is harassment. I don't know maybe if it's as much of a concern now that things have sort of died down, but in those early days, we were really worried about opening tenants up to potential harassment from landlords. So if anyone has ideas on combating that, that'd be awesome. But I will pass it to Kellen to maybe flush out this idea a little bit more.
Yeah, I sort of agree with RJ on that. It is a really interesting idea, in terms of, providing a little bit more, back and forth with landlords. So, if a landlord has a 5-star review, and a new tenant wants to get in touch with an older tenant just to get more information, that in theory, it sounds great. But sort of one of the things that this site has taught us is that good intentions don't always work out that way. We at this point, we really want to protect the anonymity of the tenant that is leaving the review. I don't know, or I can't think of a way that's safely off the top that we'd be able to collect that information while also providing that protection to them. It's easier just to collect no identifying information than to collect some and try to hide it down the line. But we're always, it's a great idea, and it's something that we can keep track of, and maybe in the future it's a way of something we're able to integrate for sure.